Okay, class, this is the actual third part or third video on the U.S. Constitution. And, well, we're dwelling on it quite a bit because it's the basis, it's the foundation for the United States of America, the country we live in, and it's the legal foundation for the federal government. And when I use the term federal government, that's synonymous really, or means the same thing as national, okay? So I'm going to use the term federal government as opposed to state governments, okay? What I want you to turn to, I think it's page 4 of the PowerPoint that's headed the Constitutional Convention, and turn to this page where it says, what is the U.S. Constitution? And as I said, it's the it created the federal government. It sets out and describes the powers and authority and structure of the 3 branches of the federal government, and it provides the legal basis for our government. And by the way, the U.S. Constitution is currently the longest living still in use Constitution in the world. So I guess the founding fathers who drafted the Constitution must have done something right, since we're still using it. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about really in this video are the 5 principles that are contained in the U.S. Constitution. And you know, if there's one thing you remember from government class, it's these principles that I want you to remember. So the 5 principles contained in the Constitution, which they strengthen the national government, make it much stronger with much more power than the government had under the Articles of Confederation, while still ensuring that our national government or federal government does not become oppressive and violate the rights of our citizens. So we're going to talk about these 5 principles one at a time. And they're listed here. Popular sovereignty, limited government, federalism, separation of powers, and checks and balances. So let's talk about the first one, is popular sovereignty. And popular sovereignty refers to the fact that ultimate power or authority rests with the people who created and elect the representatives that operate or function in the government. And when those people that are elected don't run the government in a way that the people are happy with, those people can be replaced. They can be, voted out of office, and someone else can be put in their place. So that's the idea of popular sovereignty, that ultimate control rests with the people. Okay? The second principle of the U.S. Constitution is the principle of limited government. And that was something that we inherited from the British government. The fact that the government only has those powers that the government gives to it. That the government is just not all powerful and can't just do whatever it wants. It can only do those things that the people who have created and elected the representatives in the government choose to give it those powers. So they're limited to just those. Okay? So the third principle is the principle of federalism. And federalism is the division of governmental power in our country between the federal or national government and the 50 states. Well, we have 50 now. Because unlike most of the other countries, or really any other country in the world, all other countries just have one national government that has authority over the entire country. In our country, we have a division of power because we have 50 states that each have their own state governments. and a lot of them are sort of modeled or look the same in structure as the federal government, but they have their own powers and sphere of authority, which is different than the federal government. So we have a division of power between the 50 state governments, and like in our case, the Minnesota state government, and those powers of the federal government. So that is the principle of federalism. And we've got two blue circles here. And I wanted to show you, you can probably see it much better on the copy of your PowerPoint, that under the Articles of Confederation, as you will recall, it was the states that really kept most of the power, and the National Congress, or the national government, had very little power. So that is depicted in this circle on the left, where if you think of the entire blue circle as all governmental power, actually, wait, I think I've got this. Yeah, it's the left one, where most of the power, the biggest circle, is held by the state governments, and then you've got this smaller circle of power held by the Congress under the Articles of Confederation. And what the U.S. Constitution did is basically just flip that division of power, where it gave, if you look at the circle on the right, the majority of the power is given to the federal government, but then the state governments still have their power as well. Okay? And that division of power helps ensure that our federal government will not become too powerful and oppressive to the people. And the fourth principle in the Constitution is the principle of separation of power. You will recall under the Articles of Confederation, there was only one branch of the national government. That was a one-house or unicameral Congress. Well, under the Constitution, we have three branches of the federal government. We still have a Congress, but it's a two-house Congress. Remember, that was a result of the Great Compromise, where we combine the Virginia Plan, where we have a House of Representatives, where states are represented based upon their population. So larger population states have more representatives in the House of Representatives than do small population states. And then we have a Senate, which was a result of the New Jersey plan, where every state has 2 senators, equal representation. So that's our Congress, which is the legislative branch. And we will study each of these branches in much more depth later on in the course. But to legislate means to pass laws, okay? And then, and that was the only branch, we had under the Articles of Confederation. The Constitution, we also have 2 other branches. We have an executive branch headed by the president, and then we have a judicial branch, which is a system of national or federal courts. Okay? The idea of separation of powers is that the power of the federal government is spread out or divided amongst these 3 branches of government, so that there's a division. So, for example, the executive branch headed by the president cannot become like a king or a dictator because he can't pass laws. Only Congress can do that. And he can't render decisions in cases of disputes. Only the judicial branch can do that, right? So we have a division of power, or separation of the power of the federal government into 3 parts. Okay? And then the last, here's a little graphic that shows the 3 branches of the federal government: the legislative, which is Congress, the executive branch, and then the judicial branch. Okay? And then we come to the last principle embedded in the Constitution, and that is the principle of checks and balances. And that derives from this separation of powers between three branches of the federal government, and to ensure that no one of these three branches can gain too much power and sort of dominate the other two. We have a system that we call checks and balances, where each branch can sort of check the power of the other two branches in various ways, okay? So what are some examples of that? Well, one example is that, here, let's see what we got here. We've got the executive branch here, which is headed by the president. Well, how can the executive branch, or the president, check the power of Congress? Well, as I said, the main duty of Congress is to legislate or pass laws. But Congress can pass a bill by passing both of the houses of Congress, but it can only become a law if it is then signed by the president. And if Congress passes a law or a bill that it really likes, and then sends it to the president, and the president does not like the law, he can veto it, and then the bill will never be, or will not become a law. Okay? There is one way that Congress can check that power of the president. If, let's say, Congress passes a bill and sends it to the president, and the president vetoes it because he doesn't like it, he or she, then the bill can go back to Congress, and if Congress says, you know, we really like that bill that we passed and we want it to become a law, so then both houses of Congress can vote, and if they get a 2/3 vote in both houses, they can override the president's veto. So then the bill will become a law despite the veto by the president. Okay? Another check by Congress on the power of the executive is that the president has the power to appoint all of the judges in the judicial branch, and that's a check on by the executive branch on the judicial branch. And also the executive branch has the power to appoint all other like high government officials, like ambassadors and heads of the various departments within the executive branch, like to name like the Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State and those other high government officials. But all of those appointments by the president, including the appointments of federal judges, have to be approved by the Senate in the executive or in the legislative branch. So if the president nominates, and we just had last fall, the president nominated a judge to fill a vacancy on the U.S. Supreme Court, and there were Senate hearings, and then there was a vote by the Senate whether to approve that appointment. And the vote last fall, I think, won by only one or two votes. And there have been some appointments by the president, quite a few in the past, that have been rejected by the Senate. So that's a real check, another check on the president's power. Okay? Well, what's a check that the judicial branch has on, let's say, the legislative branch? Well, the legislative branch, let's say, passes a law, and let's say the legislative branch let that law, and let's say the president signs it into law, and it says that everyone with blue eyes can't get their driver's license until they're 20, right? I know, it's kind of a silly example, but just bear with me, okay? So, do you see any problem with that law? Well, it kind of discriminates, right, against people with blue eyes. And actually that sort of discrimination violates the Constitution. And we will learn more about this power, but the judicial branch, if it finds that a law that has been passed by Congress and signed into law by the president violates the U.S. Constitution, the judicial branch can strike it down and it'll be just erased, it'll be eliminated as a law. So that's a very powerful check that the judicial branch has on both the powers of both of the other two branches, okay? Oh, and then, so those are the 5 principles, let me get this off. Yeah, okay, of the US Constitution. And there's this, I called an exit question, but I'm actually adding this to your assignment list, and you'll see this addition, this question as an addition. I typed it in red font in your assignments on the wiki, so look for that. And I want you to answer, write an answer typed in complete sentences, and you can just email it to me. You don't have to do it on Turnitin.com. But I want you to answer this question. Describe or explain 3 ways that the government created by the Constitution was an improvement over the government created under the Articles of Confederation. Okay? So I hope you have a good night, and you know, if you have any questions or comments or anything about any of the assignments, just, you know, send me an email or give me a call, and I wish you the best. Okay, bye-bye.